Have you ever had your greatest pain used as a punchline by the people you trusted most? My sister didn't just steal my crutch at our dad's birthday. She stole my dignity in front of everyone we love. That day at my dad's 60th birthday in Denver is something I will never forget, no matter how hard I try. The backyard was full of family, friends, and people who had known me since childhood. I was doing my best to move carefully with my crutch, trying not to fall on the uneven grass. I thought the day would be peaceful. I thought we would celebrate my dad. I didn't know I was walking straight into humiliation. Blair approached me with that fake sweet smile she always uses right before she does something cruel. Before I could even greet her properly, she yanked my crutch out of my hand. I lost balance instantly and fell hard into the grass. My whole body jolted with pain, but what hurt more was the sound that followed. Blair stood over me and shouted that I was faking my injury for sympathy, for attention, and even to get money out of the family. People gasped. Some laughed under their breath. Others just stared. Then my cousin Dustin stepped forward, acting like he had proof. He said he saw me walking fine at the clinic, which was a complete lie. I knew exactly what he had seen. One of my therapy sessions where I was supported by 2 parallel bars, barely managing to hold myself upright. But he twisted it into something ugly, something damaging. My parents, Maureen and Hank, didn't say a word. They didn't tell Blair to stop. They didn't ask if I was hurt. They just stood there, frozen, pretending it wasn't happening. That silence cut deeper than any words Blair could have thrown at me. They were my parents, and they let me hit the ground without even lifting a hand to help. My best friend, Talia, rushed toward me with tears of anger in her eyes. She wanted to defend me, but before she could speak, something unexpected happened. Dr. Vance Croft, my physical therapist, stepped through the circle of whispering relatives. His face was calm, steady, and focused. In that moment, he seemed like the only adult in the entire yard. He looked directly at Blair, then at the crowd, and said 6 simple words that made the whole backyard go silent again. I have the medical records here. Everything froze. Blair's confidence cracked for the first time. Dustin shifted uncomfortably. A few guests looked away in shame. And for the first time that day, I felt the ground under me stop shaking. Not because the pain was gone, but because someone finally stood up for me when my own family wouldn't. That was the moment everything began to change, though I didn't know it yet. The humiliation burned, but the truth had finally found its way into the open. Dr. Vance stood in the middle of the yard with my medical file in his hand, and for the first time that day, I felt like the truth had a voice. He opened the folder and showed the documents to the guests closest to him. He explained my condition in simple, clear words, the same way he had explained it to me months earlier when I first learned how serious my injury really was. People leaned closer, their faces changing as they realized this wasn't something I could fake, not even on my best days. Then he pulled out his phone and played a short therapy video. In it, I was struggling through a session, holding onto the parallel bars with shaking arms while he stood beside me, ready to catch me if I fell. My legs looked weak and unsteady, my face tight with pain. It wasn't pretty, and it wasn't meant for anyone else to see. But in that moment, I was grateful he had it. It showed the truth better than anything words could say. The whole yard went quiet. The same people who had laughed or stared earlier now looked ashamed, their eyes glued to the screen or lowered to the ground. I could see their confusion turning into guilt. Some even took small steps back, as if wanting to distance themselves from the cruelty they had just been part of. Blair's expression changed too. Her confident smile slipped, and her eyes darted around like she was looking for a way out. But instead of stopping, she pushed harder. She accused Dr. Vance of helping me run a scam because he felt sorry for me. She said the video could be staged, that anyone could pretend to struggle. She even tried to pull the attention back to herself, saying she only wanted to protect the family from being manipulated. I watched her talk, and for the first time, her voice didn't sound strong. It sounded desperate. The people around her weren't nodding anymore. They weren't cheering her on. They were staring at her the way you stare at someone who just crossed a line and doesn't know it. My parents finally stepped forward, but they didn't defend me. They didn't correct Blair or apologize for staying silent. Instead, they raised their hands and told everyone to calm down, to forget what happened, to just drop it and enjoy the party. They acted like it was all a small misunderstanding, like I hadn't been thrown to the ground and called a liar in front of them. Hearing them say that felt like another blow. It reminded me that their biggest fear wasn't my pain or the truth. It was embarrassment. They didn't want this to turn into drama. They wanted the birthday to stay perfect, even if I had to be the broken piece hidden under the table. But the truth was already out. It hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something shift. The lies were cracking, and everyone could finally see what I had lived with for months. Talia helped me stand and guided me away from the crowd. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see their faces or their pity now that the truth had been forced into the open. My legs were shaky, partly from the fall and partly from everything that had just happened. Talia kept one arm around me, leading me slowly toward her car parked down the street. The sounds of the party faded behind us like a door slowly closing. When we finally sat inside the car, the quiet felt too loud. I stared at my hands, still trembling, and waited for the pain in my chest to settle. But it didn't. It only grew heavier. I thought the worst part of the day had been Blair snatching my crutch and calling me a liar. But sitting there, breathing slowly, I realized the real wound came from the people who said nothing. My parents. The two people who should have stepped between me and anyone trying to hurt me. They stood there, watching me fall, watching me get humiliated, and did nothing. That silence hurt more than hitting the ground. Talia reached over and squeezed my hand. She told me she was sorry for everything I had gone through. Then she said she needed to show me something. She unlocked her phone and held it out toward me. On the screen was a video. She had recorded the entire incident from the moment Blair grabbed my crutch to when Dr. Vance presented my medical file. Every shout, every lie, every uncomfortable laugh was there. So was the quiet, the kind of quiet that tells you who really cares. I watched the video in pieces, unable to get through it all at once. Seeing myself fall, hearing the crowd react, watching Blair attack my character, it all made my stomach twist. But what struck me the hardest was seeing my parents standing there with their arms crossed, their faces tight, refusing to step in. Their silence played louder than anything Blair had shouted. By the time we reached my apartment, I had stopped crying. Something inside me had shifted. I felt tired, but not in the way that made me want to lie down. It was the kind of tired that comes right before a choice. A heavy choice. Talia helped me inside, and when I sat down on my couch, I felt clarity settle over me like a cold wave. This couldn't continue. I couldn't keep letting them treat me like a burden, a problem, or a joke. I wasn't going to wait for apologies that would never come. I wasn't going to let their silence become normal. I wanted consequences. Real ones. The kind that would finally draw a line they couldn't step over again. The decision formed in my mind, firm and steady. This ends now. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I knew this, my silence was over. Their silence had spoken loudly enough for all of us. I met the lawyer the very next morning. Her name was Mira Santos, and she had a sharp, focused way of listening that made me feel seen for the first time in a long while. She didn't interrupt. She didn't question my pain. She didn't ask if I really wanted to do this. She simply asked for the facts, watched the video Talia recorded, and nodded slowly as if everything suddenly made sense to her. When the video ended, she looked at me and said, "You have a case. A strong one." Hearing those words felt like a small piece of myself clicking back into place. Mira explained everything step by step in simple terms. First, we would file a police report for assault, since Blair pulled my crutch and caused me to fall. Then we would file a civil lawsuit for defamation and emotional distress, since she publicly accused me of faking my medical condition and humiliated me in front of dozens of witnesses. She said the video and the medical records were powerful evidence, clear, undeniable, and impossible for Blair to twist. I agreed to everything. I felt the weight of years of silence lift a little as I signed the papers. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about money. It was about drawing a clear line and finally standing on the side of my own truth. I had spent so long letting people step over me that I barely recognized the person taking action now. But I liked this version of myself more. Once the paperwork was ready, Mira moved fast. The police report was filed that same day, and the civil lawsuit was submitted. Talia stayed with me the whole time, holding my hand when my nerves kicked in and reminding me that I wasn't alone. I kept thinking about my parents and how they might react, but I pushed the thought away. This wasn't about them anymore. The first set of legal papers was served 2 days later. Blair's reaction traveled back to me almost immediately. She was furious, yelling, crying, calling everyone she knew to make herself look like the victim. She said I was ruining her life, as if she hadn't tried to ruin mine right in front of a crowd. Then my parents called. First Mom, then Dad. then both together. Their voices carried panic, disappointment, and anger all mixed together. They told me I was destroying the family, that I was taking things too far, that I needed to be the bigger person. They didn't ask how I was feeling. They didn't say they were sorry. They didn't even mention the fall or my injury. All they cared about was keeping the family image clean. I listened quietly, feeling something inside me harden. They had been silent when I needed them the most. Now it was my turn to be silent when they demanded comfort. I ended the call politely, but with a calm they didn't expect. The line had been drawn. And this time, it was one they couldn't erase. The legal process started slowly at first, but once it moved, it felt like a heavy door swinging open that no one could close again. Mira kept me updated on every step. She explained each call, each document, and each reply from Blair's side. Even though I felt nervous, I also felt a strange calm knowing the truth was finally being taken seriously. The pressure built quickly for Blair. Her employer, a well-known finance company, heard about the incident almost immediately. Word traveled fast because several guests at the party worked in related fields, and the video Talia recorded had quietly passed through a few hands. The company didn't want someone representing them who publicly mocked a disabled person and caused them to fall. They placed her on administrative leave while they reviewed the matter. It wasn't a firing, but it was a loud warning. Blair had always cared about her image more than anything, so this hit her hard. Meanwhile, Mira began reaching out to everyone who had been at the party. She wasn't rude or aggressive, but she asked direct questions, and people knew they couldn't lie. My cousin Dustin cracked almost immediately. When he faced the possibility of legal consequences for giving false statements, he admitted he had never seen me walking normally. He confessed he only saw me during a physical therapy session where I was supported by equipment and struggling to stay upright. He said Blair told him to back her up, so he did. His confession became an official statement. And with that, the story Blair tried to build started falling apart. The effect on the family was instant. Relatives who once stayed close began keeping their distance. Some didn't want to choose sides, others didn't want to defend Blair after seeing the evidence. And a few even reached out quietly to tell me they were sorry for not speaking up that day. The family group chat, usually buzzing every morning, went silent. Aunts and uncles whispered behind closed doors, unsure how to handle a conflict they couldn't brush under the rug. People who once defended Blair now avoided her. My parents struggled the most. They were torn between protecting Blair and pretending everything was fine. Dad tried telling relatives it was just a misunderstanding, but no one believed that anymore. Mom walked around acting like she was carrying a weight, but she still didn't call to apologize or ask how I was doing. Their silence toward me continued, and their guilt grew heavier each day. Everything they tried to keep hidden was now out in the open. Their perfect family image had cracks that everyone could see, and every new development made those cracks wider. For years, they expected me to just stay quiet and keep the peace. Now the peace they cared about was slipping away, and they had no control. While their world grew smaller and more fragile, mine slowly began to feel steadier. And for the first time, the balance was shifting, not in their favor, but in mine. My father showed up at my apartment without warning. I saw him through the peephole, standing there with his shoulders slumped, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. When I opened the door, he didn't come in right away. He just stood there for a moment, staring at me like he was searching for the right words, but couldn't find them. I stepped aside and let him in. He walked slowly to the couch and sat down, his hands shaking. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he finally looked up at me, and his eyes were filled with something I had never seen from him before. Fear, guilt, and regret all mixed together. He said he was sorry. Not in a casual way, not in the way people say sorry just to move past a bad moment. His voice cracked, and he struggled to get the words out. He told me he and Mom had been in denial from the beginning. They didn't want to accept my injury was permanent. They didn't want to face the truth that their child's life had changed forever. Believing Blair's cruel story, he said, was easier than admitting they had failed to support me. He said they convinced themselves I was exaggerating because the alternative, accepting my real pain, was too heavy for them. Hearing him say that felt like being hit again, but this time with honesty instead of lies. It hurt, but it also explained so much. Dad wiped his face with his hands and said he never thought things would go this far. He didn't expect the lawsuit, the attention, or the family falling apart. He said he wished he had stopped Blair that day. He wished he had defended me. He wished he hadn't stayed silent. But wishes don't erase damage. His apology was real, and I could see that he meant every word. But it didn't change what had happened. It didn't take away the fall, the humiliation, the lies, or the months of being treated like I was a problem instead of a person. I told him the lawsuit was not going away. I said it clearly and calmly. For the first time, I saw shock in his eyes. Not because he thought I was wrong, but because he realized I wasn't bending anymore. I told him this wasn't just about Blair. It was about the truth, my truth, and the way it had been ignored and twisted. He nodded slowly, like he understood. But understanding didn't fix anything. His apology was too late to undo the silence that had broken us. When he finally left, I closed the door behind him and leaned against it. I felt sad, but also strong. I wasn't turning back. Not now. Not ever. A few days after my father's visit, I received a message from Dr. Vance Croft asking if he could stop by. I agreed, though I wasn't sure what he wanted to talk about. When he arrived, he came with a quiet seriousness in his eyes, the kind that told me this wasn't just a casual check-in. He asked how I was holding up, and for once I didn't pretend. I told him the truth, that everything felt heavy, but I was standing my ground. He nodded, then said he wanted to discuss something important. He knew the lawsuit was moving forward, and he understood that the situation had already created tension in the social circle he shared with my parents. Many of them were uncomfortable with what happened at the party. Some were trying to distance themselves, pretending they hadn't laughed or looked away during the moment I fell. Others were whispering behind the scenes, trying to figure out what really happened. And through all of this, Dr. Vance had been quiet, listening, watching, and thinking. He looked me in the eyes and said he wasn't going to stay silent. He told me he would provide a formal affidavit explaining the true nature of my condition. How long he had treated me, how hard the therapy had been, how real the pain was, and how cruel the attack at the birthday party truly was. He said he would go to court and testify if needed, even if it damaged his connections with people he had known for years. Hearing that stunned me. He didn't know me anything beyond being my physical therapist. He didn't know me friendship or loyalty or support in a legal battle. But he chose to stand with me anyway. He said he couldn't watch injustice happening and pretend it didn't matter. He said the truth was too important. I felt a warmth in my chest that I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't relief. It was something stronger. It was knowing someone believed me. Not because they were related to me, not because they felt guilty, but because they knew the truth and respected it. He showed me the affidavit he had already prepared. It explained my medical condition clearly and honestly. It described the therapy sessions, the challenges, the pain, and the slow progress. He wrote that my disability was real and documented, and that the attack at the party had put me at serious risk. He didn't soften his words. He didn't hide the discomfort of what happened. He stated plainly that Blair's behavior was malicious and harmful. As I read it, I felt tears forming, not from sadness, but from feeling truly supported. For the first time in a long while, I felt like someone was standing beside me without hesitation. He placed a gentle hand on my shoulder and told me to stay strong, reminding me that the truth has weight, and now it had a voice that others would listen to. After he left, I sat quietly for a long time. The world still felt chaotic, but I didn't feel alone anymore. His support became a solid part of my strength, like a steady anchor holding me in place while the storm around me continued to swirl. And for the first time since the party, I felt a small but real sense of hope. When the court case started moving forward, I could see the fear in Blair's eyes. She tried to act confident, but the truth was clear. The evidence against her was too strong. The messages, the statements, and everything that happened at that birthday were no longer something she could twist or deny. She knew she had no real defense, and the pressure finally broke through her pride. In the end, she agreed to settle. The details were kept private, but the outcome changed everything for me. Part of the agreement included a large financial compensation that covered all the years of therapy I had paid for on my own because of what they did. It also included extra damages for the emotional harm and the stress they caused. Most importantly, Blair had to write a formal apology. It had to be signed, honest, and legally binding. She couldn't pretend anymore. She couldn't hide behind lies. She had to admit the truth. My parents tried to take a softer route. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was fear of how the court would see them, or maybe they finally realized they had pushed too far. To make things right, they agreed to sign over part of their savings to me. It was money they had always talked about giving me one day, but they used it for years to call me a burden, a problem, a leech. Now they had to hand it over officially, with their signatures and the court watching. It ended the narrative they held over my head for so long. They couldn't use money to control me anymore. When everything was settled, the house felt quiet in a strange way. There was no shouting, no blaming, no twisting of stories. Just a stillness that came after a long storm. I knew this peace came at a high price for them, but it also came with a kind of freedom for me. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt like a weight I had carried for years was finally starting to fall off my shoulders. I never wanted a fight. I never wanted revenge. I only wanted to be treated with basic respect and honesty. But since they never gave me that willingly, life forced them to face the consequences. And now, for the first time in years, I could breathe without feeling like someone was holding my past against me. With the settlement money, I was finally able to take steps I had only dreamed about before. I found a condo that was fully accessible, with wide hallways, ramps, and everything designed so I could move around safely and independently. It was a place where I could live without fear of falling or struggling with stairs, a place where I could finally feel like home. Setting up my space gave me a strange mix of relief and pride. For the first time in years, I felt in control of my life again. I also used part of the money to continue therapies I had wanted for a long time but couldn't afford. Advanced physical therapy, specialized equipment, and sessions with experts who understood my condition. Everything I had been told would make a difference, I could now access. It felt like I was finally investing in myself instead of trying to prove anything to anyone else. Every small improvement, every moment I could move with less pain, made me feel stronger and more capable. Alongside rebuilding my physical life, I wanted to do something meaningful with the experience I had gone through. I started a blog for people dealing with invisible disabilities, conditions that others might not see, that people often doubt or misunderstand. I shared my story, my struggles, my victories, and the lessons I learned along the way. It became a place for others to find encouragement, to feel less alone, and to know that their challenges mattered. Helping others gave me a sense of purpose I had never felt before. My pain finally was not just my burden. It became a tool to support and inspire others. Talia and Dr. Vance remained a huge part of my life. Talia, who had stood by me from the beginning, became like the sister I never had. Dr. Vance, who had risked his reputation to support me, became a steadfast mentor and friend. Together, they were my chosen family, the people I could trust without question. Their loyalty and care gave me the emotional support I needed to rebuild not just my body, but my life. Through whispers and calls from distant relatives, I learned that Blair was struggling. She had to leave her city, move far away, and take a new job just to recover from the fallout of her actions. Socially, she became isolated. Financially, she was strained. I didn't feel satisfaction or anger. I only realized that the life she tried to destroy had now become my foundation, while the choices she made forced her into hardship. I looked around my new condo, at the little space I had designed for safety and comfort, and felt a quiet strength I had never known before. For the first time, my life felt built on my terms, solid and steady, ready for whatever came next. My past no longer controlled me. I finally had my foundation. A year later, I hosted a small gathering in my condo. It wasn't a party with hundreds of guests or a show for anyone else. Just a few friends, Talia, Dr. Vance, and some close people who had supported me through everything. I looked around the room, feeling calm for the first time in years. The laughter, the easy conversation, and the warmth of people who truly cared made me realize something important. I was free. The crutch I used no longer felt like a mark of shame. It was just a tool that helped me move safely, nothing more. I didn't think about Blair, my parents, or anyone who had doubted me. The memories of that humiliating day still existed, but they no longer controlled me. I didn't need their approval or their validation. I had taken back control of my life, my body, and my story. The lawsuit had been hard, stressful, and emotional, but it had never been about revenge. It was about making sure the truth was seen, about correcting a false story that had been built around me. It was about showing that my life, my condition, and my dignity mattered. I had stood up for myself, not to hurt anyone, but to protect what was mine, the truth of who I am and what I have lived through. As I sat in my new home, I felt the weight of their judgment finally lift. The anger, the doubt, the shame, they were all gone, replaced by a quiet strength that had grown over the past year. I had survived their cruelty and the silence that had supported it, and I had built something stronger on the other side. I realized that I had not only defended myself, but I had also created a life that no one could take away. I walked over to the window and looked outside. The city stretched before me, busy and alive, full of possibilities. I didn't see the past in those streets or in the faces of people who had hurt me. I only saw the future, wide and open, waiting for me to shape it. I could make decisions, take risks, and build a life on my own terms. For the first time, I felt truly unshakable. My foundation was solid, built from my own strength, my own choices, and my own perseverance. Everything I had endured had led me here, and I finally understood that freedom didn't come from revenge or validation. It came from taking back my life and refusing to let anyone else define me. I smiled softly, knowing that this quiet victory was mine and mine alone.